My talk today is going to be about Sri Lanka's challenges for the longer-term development. You mentioned sustainable development, but now there is also a theme about, because this is about conflict and health, but I want to think of the conflict as the past. Now let's look to the future, longer-term development. And Sri Lanka's, of course, future depends on the past, so we have a lot of history from which to learn. So I will also present a few information or data about the past. But the story of Sri Lanka is something of a good news, bad news story. So we have had such serious talks, so I thought let me share with you a small light-hearted story about good news and bad news. There was this guy who was suffering from a fatal disease, very serious illness, and he had gone to the doctor for an important lab investigation test, and the test results are awaited. One day he comes home and his wife tells him, you know, we got a phone call from the hospital, the lab test results have arrived, they just informed me, and I have a good news and bad news. So he says, what's the good news? And tell me the good news first and tell me the bad news later. I want to hear the good news first. So the good news is that the test results show that if the disease you have is curable, is treatable, provided you take this medicine within 1 week. Okay, so that sounds not so bad. You know, I got a curable disease, I can take the medicine, I can become all right. What's the bad news? The bad news is the phone call came 10 days ago and I forgot about it. So that 1 week is gone. So now we hope that Sri Lanka doesn't get caught in that sort of a bad news situation where it is too late for us to do anything about it, right? And you will see why I am saying that. Now here is the outline of my presentation. Everything I want to talk about is in this slide. The good news here is Sri Lanka is a health star. I call Sri Lanka as a health star. And being a foreigner, you know, I'm looking at it as an outside perspective as well. It's not just a Sri Lankan being proud of my own health system. I'm talking to you as an international observer, and it is definitely a health star. Professor Jayasinghe mentioned that it is not advertised enough. I can assure you that internationally it really is very acknowledged. Maybe it's not advertised enough, but it is certainly acknowledged that it's a health star, especially among developing countries. But now Sri Lanka is a middle-income country. MIC means middle-income country. The bad news is the work is not finished. Probably it never will be finished, right? So there is still more distance to go, even though we are a health star. And now I'm including myself as a we in the Sri Lankan context because I've been in this country for 3 years. I've developed a soft corner for this country, and I consider myself as part of this group here. What are the new challenges? Aging is a new challenge. This population is rapidly aging. It has been aging for a while. So the problems of aging is a new challenge. Non-communicable diseases, it's related to aging, but it's not only the aged who suffer from non-communicable diseases. Some of our productive population is suffering from non-communicable diseases. And of course, as mentioned by Dr. Abekun, it includes injuries and mental health. And urbanization is a new problem. I mean, it's been happening for the last decade or so, and now almost 40% of Sri Lankan population live in urban areas, and it brings with it some good news and bad news again. Urbanization is a good thing in a way, but the bad news is that it also brings negative health effects. What needs to be done, I will talk a little bit about. The health system currently, as I say, is not geared for the future needs. It needs modernization, and I will make a case for that. And the last one is, we cannot do it alone. All hands on deck. And that, of course, I'm not sure how many of you will go into the Navy, but whoever is going into the Navy will recognize that statement, all hands on deck. First thing, Sri Lanka is a health star. You look at the countries I'm comparing you with. I'm not comparing you with Africa. I'm comparing Sri Lanka with Australia, UK, USA, China, Malaysia, and then below Sri Lanka, we have Maldives, India, and Pakistan, which are not doing as well as Sri Lanka. But Sri Lanka essentially compares pretty well with most of the richer countries that I have put here. You see life expectancy, 75 and 68, that is the female and male. And these are slightly better now because this data is a little bit older, but still you can see that they are pretty much comparable to some of the richer countries and the middle-income countries that I have put here. Similarly, the same goes for maternal mortality ratio. That's not as good as Australia or UK, but still much better than Maldives, which is actually richer than Sri Lanka on a per capita basis, and then even better than Malaysia. even though Sri Lanka I put here because of the life expectancy. So you have a similar sort of situation with infant mortality rate and total fertility rate. These are sort of key broad indicators we look at when we look at health status of any country. And look at this graph, you will see Sri Lanka highlighted in red. On this left side here, we talk about, this is the proportion of health spending and infant mortality, performance relative to income. The performance is so good that it is in this box which is called better than average. You have 4 boxes. Depending on, you are worse than average if you are on the right top and corner. You are better than average if you are in the left bottom corner because your income is so low, but your performance is so good. Okay? Similarly, for the maternal mortality, Sri Lanka is almost at the tip of that bottom corner, which means you are among the best in terms of getting value for money. Spending very little, you have achieved much more than what you could expect from that very little. But look at this. Unacceptable undernutrition. And unfortunately, I have to compare here Sri Lanka with African countries because you see, Ghana, Swaziland, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Togo, Malawi, Nigeria, Uganda, all have better nutrition status than Sri Lanka. I just do this to shock you, but the data are not false. Data are correct. But it is completely unacceptable for a country which has $2,800 GDP per capita, which has all sorts of fantastic health indicators and education status. So this malnutrition really cannot continue like this. It is going to affect your productivity, it's going to affect the educability of your children, and this, of course, is not only about children, but it also has implications for mothers, it has implications for adolescent girls, and so on and so forth. So this is something really needs to be urgently tackled, and of course, the Honorable President, His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa has already taken initiative to do something about it in terms of setting up a National Nutrition Council and doing a multi-sectoral action. But really, some urgent action has. And this. Now, of course, I'm taking the life expectancy here, but if you take life expectancy of the females, the Sri Lankan line is the blue one, the US line is the red one. And no harm in comparing with the US because we can't say, well, we are so poor, we can't compare. We have done so well. Now we have to start comparing with the US, UK, and Australia. And actually, the female life expectancy is still below US, but the improvement is phenomenal. In the case of male, the improvement was phenomenal until 1952, but then it's gotten flat and really the improvement is falling off. And there are reasons why male life expectancy hasn't caught up with the female life expectancy in Sri Lanka, and that has resulted in an unduly large female to male ratio in Sri Lanka. It is true that normally females are supposed to live longer than males, but the difference here is more than what is expected on average. So the good news and bad news are this. Sri Lanka's health gains are internationally acknowledged, but there is unfinished work, particularly in malnutrition, continuing re-emerging infectious diseases. I didn't give you any slide on it, but there are data to show that TB, dengue, and you know this from the newspapers, right? Dengue is still a problem. Tuberculosis has not been sorted out yet. Leptospirosis, rabies, some influenza coming, and HIV is not yet a huge issue, but it's a new emerging issue. It could be a problem if we don't continue tackling it properly. So there is unfinished work even in the communicable disease area. And of course, the new challenges which are related to what we call demographic and epidemiological transitions. Past achievements have been reached at low cost, but future needs will cost much more. It's not so easy and not so inexpensive to deal with non-communicable diseases or give long-term care to the elderly population that are growing in number, right? So we are going to see that. Past achievements were easier, or what we call low-hanging fruits. Now, what in the world is demographic transition? I don't know how many of you have heard of this term, but let me show you graphically what it means. We have what we call as age-sex pyramid. Basically, the age-sex pyramid shows the population percentages on the x-axis and the age group on the y-axis. It shows what proportion of your population are in the 0 to 4 age group, what proportion in 5 to 10 age group, etc., progressively. The pyramid, the name pyramid comes because it looks like a pyramid, right? But look at that one. That doesn't look like a pyramid. That looks like Stonehenge. I don't know how many of you know Stonehenge. That is an architectural sort of a marvel that is in the UK. That has all kinds of funny shapes. It's not looking at pyramid at all. In Sri Lanka, that is how that age-sex pyramid will look like in 2050. What it shows is your population in 0 to 4, 10 to 14, 20 to 24, etc. will be so narrow, will be so much fewer, and you'll have a much bloated pyramid at the top, which is why it doesn't look like a pyramid, because the elderly population, the proportions are going to be much more. And you will also notice there, the yellow is the female and the red is the male. So the yellow bars are longer, especially as you go higher and higher. They will live longer. Maybe they are happier without us, right? On the other hand, they will have to then live alone. It's not necessarily a good thing for the women who have to live alone, and especially women who have not had economically productive lives, and their incomes will not be there, their pensions will be reduced. I mean, they are dependent on the families. So that's a fundamentally huge problem if you're thinking about the future of Sri Lankan health. And if you're thinking about that today, you're doing a good job. If you're thinking about it 10 years later, 20 years later, then the problem is already with you. I'm sorry, then the bad news will be too late to deal with, right? So that's an important thing. I'm going to show this in an animated graph. It will show you how the age groups are moving as time passes by, okay? So what I want you to watch there is, look at this bottom graph, that two bars, how they become older and older. So who is in 0 to 4, 5 years later will be in 5 to 9, right? Whoever is in 5 to 9 will be in 10 to 15. So like that, you can see that movement. I'm not going to speak. I'm going to let you watch it and see. It's just a very quick animation. It's too fast, right? So this is, see, look at the year on the top. From 2007 to 2040, then 2050. And 2075, even worse. These are the projected things. So what you saw was here the graph here getting older and older, and they become older populations, right? What does that do? Forget about health for a while. What does that do to your labor market? The people who are working